to the Legal Edge Coaching Podcast. This is your host, Trevor White, with the other host,
Shane Smith.
All right. Welcome, guys. Welcome, Shane. How are you doing today, man?
Doing well. Having a pretty good Monday here in Georgia.
Yeah, it's Monday, the time we're recording this. We record all our shows on Monday, but this is episode number 1. So we're excited to get this rolling, to get it going. Shane and I have been working together for a long time, and we've talked about putting a podcast together. Really, like, my intent behind this, and I'll come to you in a sec, Shane, but like, my intent behind this is really, there's some things I've learned about how to create a business and not blow your entire life up. And I learned this because I blew my entire life up, and I created a life for myself that wasn't working, and I'd had business success and everything else was destroyed. And I learned so much along the way of doing that. And I know there's just a lot of guys and girls out there that are stepping up into this world of trying to be a business owner, right? You step out and you want to do this, but there's so many things you just don't know. And I just feel like there's a lot of value that can be had with just, hearing from somebody who's already done it and somebody who's been there. So it makes it, I don't know. It's like, why reinvent the wheel, right? If I've already screwed it up, and maybe I can tell you how to not screw it up yourself, and vice versa, man. Because Shane, you've been in the game for a long time, right?
Oh yeah, I think 20 years. I've had my own firm 16, and one of the best pieces of advice I got 16 years ago is I was talking to a guy who I thought might be a partner. And he said, yeah, there's a guy who runs this coaching program up in Virginia. We ought to take a look at that. And I did. So I've had some sort of coaching and mentoring all 16 years, I think. Just about, it may have taken 1 or 2 years off. But I mean, you learn from everybody else. You learn from your peers. You learn from the guys ahead of you. Heck, you can learn a little bit from the guys behind you. They're doing something you're not doing. It just shows something. So like you say, why reinvent the wheel? Some of the best things I brought to my own firm, I learned from somebody else, right?
100%. And one thing I want to set up too about this show and the way we're going to do it is, this is not going to be just your typical, basically, hey, we're going to give you some marketing tactics. We're going to talk about running your firm and like, it's not going to be that at all. This is one of the things that I think is valuable, is the fact that we tell the truth, right? And this was something I learned the hard way, that if you don't tell the truth, you're kind of screwed and you really have a problem. But this is like real stuff, right? This isn't going to be fluff. We're not going to sit here and talk about all of the great, wonderful things that happen inside of being a business owner and hiring employees and trying to balance all of that while you're married and while you have children. And there's just that whole game. Like, this isn't about kumbaya, because the reality is, those are like, those kumbaya moments, at least for me, were like one moment of kumbaya, and then all the rest were like chaos, stress, anxiety, worry, frustration. Oh my gosh, how am I going to pay payroll? How am I going to pay my bills? I got other stuff coming up. I just screwed this case. All these things are going to be a part. So, and one thing I want to frame up real quick is, number one, this is called the Legal Edge Coaching. But guess what? I'm not, people. I am not an attorney. Right? I'm not an attorney. So I wanted to get that out of the way so you guys understood. I've been an entrepreneur and a businessman for many, many years. Shane and I have worked together for several years. And I understand things from a business side. And I have really, Shane and I came together because we were both seeking this concept, this idea of having it all. And we just realized that there was this power in being able to be vulnerable, honest, and tell the truth about where you're at. And then Shane, tell everybody why you wanted to not just do the podcast, but why kind of take this stewardship of the I guess the mentor role. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but why give back and help other people to kind of do what you've done?
Yeah. So, and one, I am a lawyer, have been a lawyer for 20 years, and have owned my own law firm for 16 of those 20 years, or been a lawyer for 24 years. Owned my own law firm for the last 16 of those years. And, I'll do two things. One, you say you're not a lawyer. Obviously, you're not. But I think that's one of the big misconceptions a lot of lawyers have, is I can only learn from a lawyer, or I need lawyers to do all the management in my own firm, which is a huge handicap, right? We have a manager-driven firm here with that infrastructure in my office. And it's one of the best moves I made years ago, right? I mean, your office manager is generally not an attorney, but you can fill these high-level positions with executives and smart businessmen where your attorneys still take care of your clients and still do attorney stuff, but they're not doing all the other stuff that they probably either don't want to do or are not very good at. So one of my mentors is not a lawyer. And as a matter of fact, he used to say he hated lawyers, for about the first 5 years I knew him and worked with him. But why did I want to start the podcast and start doing the legal edge? Honestly, the legal edge coaching was, I guess there are three things. One, I see a ton of lawyers, their life is in complete shambles, right? So they start turning to alcohol or drugs or affairs. They're doing whatever, and they're just destroying their life. They work for 20 years to build up their firm, and then they just destroy it all in one version or another, self-imploding, which I think is terrible. Two, I've got a great marriage, great relationship with my kids, and I hate seeing lawyers who you're in a context and you're talking to them and their children, and I'm like, hey, is your son or daughter going to move up into your firm and come work for you as a lawyer? And their answer is no. And I'm like, why in the world would you not do that? Oh, they don't want to be a lawyer. Well, they don't want to be a lawyer because they've seen usually a terrible impact on your family unit, right? Your family is not great, or your lifestyle is not great, or something's wrong. Otherwise, why would your child not want to move into the business and work with their parents, right?
Yeah.
Either that. And I think that's terrible.
Yeah. If it was working, then your kids would see that it was working so well, they'd be like, I want that.
Yeah.
I want that life. But I think this is the crazy part, right? Because we think it's all about money. Oh, if I go make money and I go do well financially, well, that's what matters, right? But your family, when they look at you, just like you're describing, and they're like, yeah, I don't want anything to do with that. Yeah. And they're not measuring it off of the money side, right? They're literally looking at the other stuff you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, they're looking at, are you at home at dinner all the time? And when you're there, are you present or are you on your phone? Or as soon as you get up from dinner, does dad or mom go into the office and start answering emails again? Or can they take vacations with the kids? Or is dad just an asshole when he gets home from work because, the stress of running everything, he's got no nerves left for his family and kids. I mean, it's not about money to them, to the second generation. It's not. It's about, were you able to take everything, make money, but also have a good, impactful relationship with your wife and kids, whatever that looks like to you. And so often it's not, or so often, not only do they have no relationship with their kids, but they destroy their marriage. Divorces.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that? What is that? Because it's not uncommon. What you're describing is not uncommon at all. It's right. That's like the standard. That's not like the exception or the outlier. What you're talking about is being the outlier. So, but why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, being an attorney is high stress anyway, right? I mean, we go an attorney and a lot of times we see it's a win-loss, right? If we win, the other side loses, which is also a lawyer or an adjuster or, so many other sides. So at work, we're confrontational. They deal with clients that are highs and lows. And honestly, like a lot of businesses, the more you work, the more money you're going to make, right? And there's always more work to do. I can't think of a time when I'm like, man, I got no work to do today. Right? There's always extra work. And if you don't figure out a way to balance that, you're so tired or you're working all the time and then you go home and your wife and kids get what's left over. Right? I mean, even the bar.
If there's anything left over. And most of the time there's nothing left over. Like there isn't. I realized I didn't reframe what I said because I'm not an attorney, but I've been in a coach and consulting space for about 15 years. I've been doing this for a long time and helping people see what they don't see, right? And helping them understand what you're talking about. But dude, it was the same way for me. And I think my pit was horrendous, bro. Like I'd had it all. I'd had everything, but what I didn't have is what you're talking about. Like I was awake before my kids, and I was awake and out of the house before my kids woke up. And I would get home when they were well in bed, like they were gone. And if best case, my wife tried to wait up for me. And, I'd come home and she's like literally going to bed. And I'm like, oh, hey, what's up, babe? Give her a kiss. And that was literally it. And this would go on for days and days and days. And I might even just see my kids on the weekend. Like saying that now, I'm like, I can't even believe my wife stood around me as long as she did.
Yeah.
And when she left, it made perfect sense. And she, what's crazy, Shane, is she was so pissed at me because of the life we created. And here's the thing, we made a lot of money. So she had all the shit. And we've been in many fights where it was like, I literally said some of these things to her, which is crazy. Like this is all you guys out there, you want to lose your marriage quick as you possibly can, say this to them. Say this to your wife when she's angry at you. Say, you see that car you drive? You should be grateful. You see the house you live in? You should be grateful. When she's complaining that I'm not home. And that was my rebuttal. Yeah, that's the quickest way to a divorce. But she was so angry with me. that when we got divorced, we lived in Utah at the time, and she moved as far away in staying in the continental United States as she possibly could. She literally moved to the Florida, and then Florida wasn't far enough, and then she moved to the Florida Keys.
Yeah.
She was like, I am so done with you. I need to leave. Literally can't even be in the same time zone, let alone it was crazy because of how much of an asshole I was. And I lost everything.
Yeah.
Because I thought, well, this is why I'm so curious, like how we all do this, right? It's like we're told this thing. And I don't know who tells it to us. Like, I don't know. Do you remember who told you that you have to work 80 hours a week in order to be successful? Like, I don't remember.
I think back. I mean, I know for me, I would always hire to take the pressure off somebody else in the beginning, right? Which of course means as you grow, there's more work for you to do. When I worked for another big firm, it was all commission based, right? So it was like, hey, and I don't know, my roots, I'm going to say the blue collar work ethic kind of thing. Like I can make more money, let me just make more money. And then I'll tell you, it was sort of worse for me. I remember, and I was driving an hour and a half to work, driving an hour and a half home, working all day, getting home at dark like you. And I remember telling my wife I was going to hang some sheetrock one time in our basement. She goes, what the hell do you know about hanging sheetrock? And I'm like, I don't think it's that hard. I said, I'm not even going to do the mudding. I'm just going to hang it. And she goes, when are you going to hang it? You don't get home till 7:30 every night. You give the kids a bath and put them to bed. That lasts till 8:30. You're going to do it between 8:30 and 10 every single night. How long is that even going to take you? But she said, I know what, you're on commission. Why don't you just get your ass to work this weekend, make some more money, and I'll just hire somebody to do it. So it went right in my head, right? Like, you're on commission, work hard, make more money, take care of stuff. You can make problems go away if you just make enough money. That was the idea for a long time.
And it works. That's the problem. It works for a while. And the money kind of numbs the feeling, right? When you're going to the right restaurants. And I remember, like, when my wife, we moved to Vegas, and I remember when we were in Vegas, like, and this was like this was back in, what would this have been, like 2002, 2003. So this was a minute ago. But like Vegas was like, you valeted everywhere you went. But we were going to all of we had spots that we would go that were like and I loved it. And it was fun because when I would bust my ass and work a bajillion hours throughout the week, and then we go out Saturday night, and I didn't even care that she was with me. I mean, I feel like an asshole saying that, but what I cared about is that I had a woman with me and that we went to that restaurant. Do you know what I mean? And I got to pull up, and the valet knew who I was, and we get there, and they're like, "Hey, Brother White," or "Mr. White," whatever. Like, and so I'm getting out, and I remember feeding off of that, and my wife enjoyed it too because she got like the jewelry and the experience, and she was treated like a queen and a princess. But that wears off so fast.
Yeah, but I mean, and entrepreneurs tell you too, right? I mean, it's this. Well, even lawyers. You go work at a big firm, it's billable hours. And I was on contingency, which we don't track our hours, but the expectation is still a bunch of hours, right? I mean, we go through law school with the idea you're going to work 60 hours a week, and like that's sustainable. And that's what you have to do to get ahead. So therefore we do it, and I remember running around with entrepreneur groups, and also, they wear like a badge of honor, right? Like, oh, I normally work 60, 70 hours a week. And most people are wrong on how much they actually work, right? They said they work 70, 80 hours a week. And you're like, I did that 1 year. And, I don't recommend it, is what I'll say.
Well, you're, like you said, they're lying. Most people that say that, they're not actually doing that. They might be at the office that amount of time, but they're not working that whole time. But dude, to your point, that badge of honor, it's the funniest thing ever. I was bragging to a friend because I'd hit diamond status with Delta.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I'm the top shit. I'm diamond status, blah, blah, blah. And he just looks at me with this weird, curious look on his face. And I was kind of like waiting for him to speak. And then he does. And he was like collecting his thoughts, trying to think, how do I deliver this to him? Because I was like, I'm the man. I'm the diamond status, which I didn't get it until he said this. And he looks at me, he's all, bro, do you realize all that means is you're never home with your family? And dude, it hit me in that moment. It didn't hit me enough that I did anything about it because status was meant too much to me, right? It was what I was being defined on. I was measured, my value as a man came down to, could I provide not just a little bit of money for my family, but a lot of it. And the fact that, no different than what you're talking about, like if I don't work, I don't make money. Yeah. There's no paycheck coming in. Like nobody's just saying, hey, Trevor, here's some money because you're you. Great. You get this check because it's Friday. No, if I produce, I get a check Friday. And so it would just be this continual game of going after that. And yeah, dude, I think it's addicting. I think it becomes a trap. I think you get stuck, right, in this place. And I know you were stuck,
I did,
right, in
yeah.
this place because it got, and it's almost like you create your own golden handcuffs because you don't know what to do because you've created a life. So you start to have a little bit of success, right? And I remember when I did, and I was like, oh my gosh. And then it feeds more, but then you get stuck in this. You can't work harder. You can't work more hours. You can't do, and it's just not possible. And nothing's increasing. So then frustration starts to hit. And this is where, for me, this is where I went to rum.
Yeah.
It was a bottom of a rum bottle. Because I didn't know how to deal with the stress. Like my marriage was a shambles. And it was like, well, how do I deal with the pressure of what I'm dealing with? I can't seem to grow. And I have this pit in my stomach because I'm like, I'm not growing. So I'm pissed off all the time. So I feel like I'm on a Groundhog's Day.
Yeah.
It's Groundhog's Day with some success. So you're like, it's okay. But then how do I deal with it? Well, let me just go drink every single night because, well, that's the thing to do because that's going to help. Right? At least it let me escape, right? So I didn't have to feel the pressure anymore. And, and for 7 years I did that.
Fine. And a lot of times you get in a spot where you feel like that's the only way to make your mind calm down, right? I mean, because otherwise you're laying in bed at 9, 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night and you're thinking about, oh, I got all this stuff to do. I could go do it right now. Or how do you calm it down enough? Well, I'll drink a little bit. I mean, yeah, when I got stuck, I mean, you know my story, but when I got stuck and quit growing, then not only did I feel like I was stuck, I felt like I was losing, right? I mean, like everything is just a waste. I'm losing. I'm not winning at life. Mike shouldn't even have the law firm, right? I should go work for somebody else. And what a crazy thought. I mean, I was making $500,000 a year at the time. I mean, like anybody's going to pay me to come on board their team and pay me that much money. I mean, and I'm just going to have to deal with this different types of problems, but still grunt work. I mean, so,
yeah.
I'll just say I was totally stuck and I was stuck for years until I figured a way out.
It's tough. And dude, I mean, and really, and I think to our listeners, everybody who's kind of getting to know who you and I are, like we're all on the same journey. What's different is that some of us admit it and some of us don't, right? Some of us just lie about it. We just lie that we're not actually facing this kind of a reality or we haven't hit it yet, right? We think we're the exception. We're like, oh no, I'm way cooler. I'm smarter. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to continue, I'm going to work the system somehow and I'm going to beat it. And, I'm not weak or whatever. We want to have all this judgment we put on other people. And, I get it. Like to be a good attorney, you got to be kind of arrogant.
You do. I mean, but, like yours was Jen. I prefer tequila as my drug of choice, I mean, you've got all this pressure and then not only do you have to calm down, but you have to have some kind of relationship with your wife and kids. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, that's one of the issues, right? There's a joke that says, who would marry a lawyer? Because they just fight all the time. And then you go home and you're not supposed to fight, right? You fight for 40 hours a day.
You're a professional fighter
yeah. I mean, 40 hours a week. And then you go home and you're supposed to play Legos with your 6-year-old son or, be nice to your wife or your spouse. I mean, it's really tough. And that's one of the reasons why they turn to alcoholism. And I think that's also why a lot just go work, right? They come home, they argue with their spouse and they're like, screw this, I'll just go work. And then they go into the closet and work some more or their office.
It's easier. It's easier to do that. I did it many times. Where I knew that to avoid conflict with my now ex-wife, but to avoid conflict with her, I just wouldn't go home. Like I was done working. Like I could have been done for the day, and I'm like, I don't want to go deal with her because it's just going to go. It's easier for me instead of fixing my marriage. It's easier for me just to stay at the office and work another 2 hours because at least then I'm like, well, I'm a high-level producer. I'm producing money. I'm doing this thing, and I'm. Like, I don't know. I bought that narrative so hook, line, and sinker. It was it. I think a lot of it had to do with just growing up with parents that didn't have any money.
Yeah, a lot of that.
So I was like fighting against that. And I had a very, very scarcity mindset. I was worried about not having money because I grew up not having money. I grew up in an environment where we didn't, end of the month, no money, no food. It was like, well, what are we going to do? And we'd go to like the storehouse and get food. Like it was like, and I didn't even know that was a problem until I realized it was a problem. But like so I'm fighting that story. And it was just like, yeah, it was just, but it's like a never ending cycle until like life had a way of slapping me in the face. Right.
Oh, the scarcity mindset's it's awful and it's so prevalent. I mean, I dealt with it for decades. Yeah, that was probably one of the hardest fights to have and to work through. And I think a couple of years ago, I finally got past it, but all I really did was keep changing my scarcity level, right? It went from, let me make 100 grand, let me make 200 grand too. Well, I made 500 grand, but I'm still worried about, okay, what if next year I don't, right? This is the
Yeah.
contingency roller coaster a lot of law firms go through too. They have
Yeah.
one good year, then they have these crappy years, or they have one good case, then they have these crappy times, or this up and down, and they don't ever establish like a minimum base that they know they're going to make. Or, like I did one time, I just put all my wins in one account and said, I'm going to pay myself this much money every single month, and just it transfers automatically. So I knew I didn't have this up and down, because that drives that. Honestly, that's one of the things that's such a detriment to the wives of business owners. And I'll say wives because I've got a wife, is that uncertainty and fear about how much money am I going to have, right? And, the up and down, and you come down and you talk about, I made a business mistake. I made an advertising mistake, and we spent 10 grand. And suddenly I'll say my wife, she's worried, well, shit, what does that mean? Right? Does that mean we don't have money to pay bills? Does it mean?
Have you ever had to have a conversation with your wife? I don't know. I'm curious. I don't know if you've ever had, like, where you're literally, you have to come home and be like, babe, don't spend money. Shit went sideways. Don't spend money. I'll figure it out, but don't spend anything.
I came down in the early, well, yes. I mean, I've had that conversation, especially like when we first started the law firm, right? And we had no money, right? I didn't have any cases, and I was doing criminal cases for the first 6 months. And, bottom basement, I just wanted cash, right? So I'm doing it $500 down a payment plan. So, I mean, it's awful. It's like, we ratcheted everything down, right? No eating out. We didn't go to generic food at the grocery store, but it was like very tight, no cable. We only had internet because we worked at my house all the time. My wife's setting up claims. We put the kids to bed and my wife's setting up claims, trying to make money kind of deal. I mean, so yes, I've had that conversation. And it's not great. And looking back, I realized how much anxiety it produces in my wife, the 2 or 3 times it did. But I remember the early days, we were doing pretty much the envelope method, right? So you cash your checks, you got all your envelopes labeled for everything, and you put it in there. And one Friday night, we're like, oh, what are we going to go do? Let's do entertainment. Because I think we had $80 a month in entertainment, right? These are the early dark days. Yeah. And my wife goes, well, we got 80 in entertainment, but groceries empty, and we need some groceries. So I think we're gonna go to the grocery store for entertainment this Friday. That sort of sucks.
Oh, dude, it's horrible, especially when you start to get abundant and then you make a dumb choice. And I've had that happen where we had some success, right? And I didn't want to admit that I'd screwed up to my wife. And so I didn't tell her to rein it in. So we'd had like this lifestyle, but the money wasn't coming in the same. And I was just everything I could do to try to fix the problem, which is crazy. So instead of trying to unite her in, letting her know, hey, this is what we're going through, maybe we should, be a little smarter here, I'd let her, because I don't want to feel like I'd failed.
You don't want to be a failure, right?
Yeah. And so I just sat there and I just kept trying to figure the problem out. All the meanwhile, dude, she's spending like we're making like we were where we were. And I don't want to tell her not to, but I'm pulling up the app, and every time I look at it, I'm like, oh shit. And then it was down to simple, like she would get her nails done, and I'm all, oh my gosh, that's $100. Like I'm like, okay, well, we're fine, because it was just I'm watching me keep screwing up on the production side, and I'm putting more time in. Fortunately, we made the turn, I made the corner, but I had to have that conversation before I did. I came to her and I was just like, babe, you got to stop spending money.
And if you're not careful, so many people do exactly what you do, and at least you realize it, because I've seen a lot. They just keep going, and then they transition from upset every time they see it to they get more and more pissed off, but they don't tell her what the issue is. Yeah. So then she thinks it's her. Yeah. And that obviously creates a lot of friction. And then all that friction means you're not doing your best at work, because you're thinking too. I mean, you're pulling up the app and you're saying, well, shit, my wife got her nails done today. That's $100. I'm losing. So you get mad at everything she's doing, and you haven't even told her. You told her there's a money issue.
Yep. I mean, and the crazy part, then you'll go meet with a client, right, that you're trying to close for a new case or whatever it is. You meet and your energy is sucked out, and then you don't close.
Right.
Then you do shitty at your job. Like, it is the cycle of all. And dude, and I think that's one of the things that, as we kind of wrap for today and we kind of wrap up today's show, kind of final areas I want to express to everybody, like Shane and I have been through some shit. Like, we've gone up and down a roller coaster of what it means to be a business owner, but then also balance it out with how do you build a life now when you know there's certain ways it doesn't work, that's great. It's easy. We all know that. We all, everything we've talked about today, Shane, I don't think anyone's like, oh, wow, that's novel, new ideas, right? We're all like, no shit, Sherlock. That's what we all experience right now. So great, got it. That's what we all experience. But now we look going in what the show is really going to be about is the journey and the lessons and principles that you and I learned along the journey. I think you kind of have figured yours out was around 8 years. Mine was about a decade. So we're about the same of us kind of operating independently, trying to figure out how do we make this work? Because there's a way, right? You see the unicorn of the person out there who has it. You're like, man, is it fake? Like you have the money and you've got like this family that you seem to be like super happy and you like you're talking about God and being spiritually connected and you having purpose and you're happy and you find joy and you're taking these big vacations and you're like, is that real? How could it be real? Is it fake? If I peel back the layers, would it be bullshit? And for a lot of years, I thought that was it. Right. I thought it was a lie and a facade, but then I just was like, no, let's see if it's real. And you and I both went on our own independent journeys and then we connected along our paths. And then I think it's just amplified this way of building a life that doesn't just sort of work, but where you literally have it all. Like every area of your life. And here at Legal Edge, we break it down into basically 4 domains, right? Body, being, balance, and business. But business is only 25% of the equation. But the crazy thing is, and I know you've experienced this, I have too, when you can get the other 3 domains on fire, when they're working, you make more money.
100%.
Yeah, when you take the focus off of the thing intensely, like where that's the only thing, you actually produce more, not less, which goes contrary to what I believed back when I was younger.
You know what I think is so funny about it though is as a business owner, we've all had an employee who was great, and then their home life went in the gutter, and they became a terrible employee. And we've counseled them on like, you got to get your stuff under control. You got to leave it at the door, or leave it at the door, right? That's a ridiculous statement, but we say it all the time. But we've seen it happen to our employees, but then we don't think it happens to us. I mean, I talked to one of my team members, and I'm like, I know you're buying a house, but if you're not careful, you're going to screw up your production because it's your home life isn't all this chaos. And they're like, nah. And then always the numbers they look back and they're like, oh man. I mean, like when I bought one of my houses, it was the worst quarter I had in like 3 years. I mean, it was terrible. And I'm like, and it wasn't even a terrible process. It was just, and I'm like, what is this? I mean, when your home life is bad, it impacts everything. Or when your health is bad, I mean, you want to screw something up, watch somebody have a heart attack, or like when I broke my ankle, right?
Yeah. Well, dude, I was 40 years old, 5 years ago, and I'm sitting at a concert and I literally started having a heart attack, a real one, not just bullshit anxiety attack. I'm like, oh shit. And I'm sitting there with my wife and my son. It was his birthday. We're taking him to an NF concert and we're sitting up at the VIP that like overlooks the stage. And I look over and I see EMTs. Like I see the paramedics because they're at a concert, right? And I'm thinking, you know what? I can either get in the car and drive to that hospital, which I'll then be away from help, or if I go full on cardiac arrest right now, there's EMTs right there, and they can help me. And you know what's crazy? So I didn't, and I ended up not needing the EMTs. We ended up driving to the hospital after. They run some tests real quickly and like, oh shit, we need to admit you. Your heart's in. I don't remember the word they used. Some shit was going sideways with my heart and it was putting out this enzyme that only happens when your heart's under duress. And so they keep me there for 48 hours, run all sorts of tests. And the conclusion after meeting with cardiologists and all this stuff is, Trevor, your heart's actually healthy, but you're dying because of everything else. Like if you don't fix your scenario, your stress that you're experiencing, everything that you're under, like you're going to die. Like, so you gotta solve that. And it wasn't that I needed to have less stress. It was that I had no balance at all. It was that my focal point was in one direction and back to it. It was like this balance. And so, yeah, like, great, go make all the money in the world and then die at 40. I'd be like, well, that was worth it. My wife will get a hell of an insurance policy. So she's going to go live a great life without me, but I'm dead. Yeah. That was worth it. Right. Yeah. It's like, oh my gosh. Like, so what we're talking about, Shane, is not just little life hacks. This is literally life or death. Yeah. There's no other way to describe it.
And honestly, I believe you should have a wonderful life, right? Like we all deserve a wonderful life that works for us, whatever, and really works. And and it's a little different for everybody, but I mean, by golly, you should live a life that's like almost like the bright shining city on the hill, right? That's an inspiration to other people. I think it can be in the legal industry. I mean, I live a great life. I like my life. I remember I was at one event, and one of those icebreakers is like, hey, if you lost everything and you get to start over and you got this certain amount of money and you get a place to live for 6 months, what would you do? And everybody's picking these wildly different career paths. And I'm like, I'd go do what I do. I like it. I liked it then. I like it now. And I want to do it with my wife. I don't want a new one. I want her.
It is. So there's a way to build it. So this is going to be a fun journey. Shane and I are going to go down and we're going to really teach what we know. And what we know is pretty powerful. So this is just kind of the get to know you, get to know who Shane is, get to know who I am. You can follow us on any of our social medias at Legal Edge Coaching. Hit us up at legaledgecoaching.com. We're here broadcasting a message that you can have it all, right? And not just sort of not in concept and theory. And as you tune into episode after episode, we're going to get real tactical with real life shit, right? I am probably one of the most vulnerable people I know. There's nothing about me that I hide. I share my dark, I share my light, I share life. Because the reality is the more I try to pretend I don't have darkness and evil and the bad shit that I do and the thoughts that I have, the more I try to do that, the bigger problem they become for me. And so to be able to share that and help, and I know every other man and woman out there, you guys are the same. You just may not know it yet or haven't had kind of seen that. So I think I'm excited. Any final thoughts, Shane, you got for today as we kind of roll?
No, I mean, and like you say, there's highs and there's lows, right? There's good spots and bad spots. I've had a lot of bad spots where, you look at it and you're like, hey, I don't know how we're going to get out of this, but, still had faith in myself that I was going to get out of it, right? But I mean, it's certainly there. I mean, growing the firm over these last 16 years, from nobody to 150 people. I mean, I've dealt and from no money to 20 million in revenue. I mean, I've dealt with all of those issues, and sometimes the issues, all they do is add a zero to it, right? They get bigger. Yeah. I mean, you still evaluate advertising, you still make bad decisions, you still, make decisions that in hindsight, you're like, that was a dumb move, right? Or I didn't test that very well. I rushed into it, or I did all these things. But yeah, I mean, it's highs and lows, and we've learned a lot over the 2 decades of experience, and happy to help some folks out. Some of it will probably be really enlightening, and other stuff is not so enlightening. But if you put it in practice, it can change your life.
Yeah, well, it'll be enlightening based upon what they do with it. I mean, that's at the end of it all, because there's a path and a map that we have figured out. And it's going to be fun to dive in, and that's it. So if you get value from today's show, go ahead and share it up. We really appreciate it. So if you know somebody, another attorney that maybe you work with, an associate, maybe your firm, right? Have them listening and to this idea, because I can promise you, the more people around you to get that understand that, hey, it doesn't have to be grind 80 hours a week and focus on nothing else but the firm. And the more people you get around you have that mindset, the easier it'll be for you to actually do some of the stuff that goes against the grain. So that's all we got for you today on episode number 1 of the Legal Edge Coaching Podcast. Have a fantastic.
I was going to say one quick postscript, Trevor, is obviously we're about not working crazy hours or working 80 hours. We're not going to tell you it's going to be easy, but we are also about helping you grow your firm so you're actually making more money and can spend it in that wonderful life. So
that's right. If you don't make money, it's not worth it. I tried that way too. Being poor sucks. Being rich is awesome. So be rich.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Have a fantastic night, everybody. This is the Legal Edge Coaching. See you later.